Risk assessment. For a lot of people, that phrase just brings to mind endless paperwork and a big compliance headache. But what if we looked at it differently? What if, instead of a chore, we thought of it as a core business process? A tool that can transform your workplace from just managing risk to being genuinely resilient. So, let's break down how you actually make that happen.
All right, here's our game plan. We're going to start with why this stuff matters so much, the high stakes. Then we'll walk through the official 5-step process. After that, we'll get into the pros toolkit for choosing the right safety controls. We'll also cover the common mistakes that you really want to avoid. And finally, we'll look at what it means to go beyond just ticking boxes and aim for the gold standard in safety. So first up, why is this so critical? Well, honestly, it really boils down to two huge things: money and the law. Getting workplace safety wrong has these massive consequences that go way beyond the immediate and tragic human cost of an accident.
Just take a look at that number for a second. 21.6 billion pounds. That's what work-related injuries and ill health cost the UK every single year. We're talking lost productivity, healthcare costs, the whole shebang. It's an absolutely staggering figure, and it really shows you just how big of an impact this has on a national scale.
And beyond the massive financial hit, there's a much simpler reality. It's the law. In the UK, you've got regulations like the Health and Safety at Work Act. They make it crystal clear that employers have a legal duty to keep their people safe. So let's be blunt. A risk assessment isn't just a good idea, it's a legal requirement. It's not optional. Okay, before we dive any deeper, we need to get two terms straight that people mix up all the time: hazard and risk. A hazard is the thing that could cause harm. The chemical, the ladder, even something as simple as an open filing cabinet drawer. The risk is the chance, high or low, that that hazard will actually hurt someone. This is so important. We don't get rid of all ladders, right? We manage the risk of falling from them.
Okay, so we get why it's vital. But how do you actually do it? Well, the good news is you don't have to invent the wheel. There's a really clear official framework from the Health and Safety Executive, or HSE. Let's walk through their 5-step process. And here it is. It's a simple, logical cycle. First, you spot the dangers. Then, you figure out who could get hurt. Third, you weigh the risks and decide what to do. Fourth, you write it down and actually do it. And number 5 is the one people forget. You review it and keep it updated. This shows you right here that safety isn't a one-time project. It's a living, breathing process.
Now let's zoom in on that first step, identifying hazards. This is where you have to be a bit of a detective. You can't do this from behind a desk. You've got to walk the floor, look around, check the manufacturer's instructions for your equipment. But you know what the most important part is? Asking your employees. Seriously, they're the ones on the front line. They know the dangers that a manager might never see. So once you know the hazards, you have to evaluate the risk. And this is where a really important legal idea comes into play: reasonably practicable. What does that mean? Well, it means you have to do what is reasonable to manage a risk. You have to weigh the risk against the cost, time, and effort it would take to fix it. The law doesn't expect you to eliminate every single risk on the planet, but it absolutely requires you to do everything reasonable to protect people.
Okay, so you've evaluated the risk. Now comes the part where the real expertise kicks in: choosing the right controls. See, not all safety measures are created equal, and the pros use a very specific framework to pick the most effective ones.
This right here is the hierarchy of controls, and it's one of the most important ideas in safety management. Think of it as a ranked list, from most effective to least effective. Right at the very top, the absolute best solution is to eliminate the hazard. Just get rid of it completely. And look what's way down at the bottom: PPE, personal protective equipment. Things like hard hats and gloves. They're important for sure, but they should always be your last line of defense, never your first.
Let's make this real. Say you're dealing with hazardous fumes from welding. Using the hierarchy, you'd start at the top. Can we change the design so we don't need to weld at all? That's elimination. No? Okay, can we substitute the material for one that creates less fume? Still no? Then we move to engineering controls, like installing a ventilation system to suck the fumes away. Only after we've tried those do we think about administrative controls, like rotating jobs. And finally, as the last resort, providing respirators. See how that works?
Now, the process and the tools, they seem pretty straightforward, right? But we all know that in the real world, things can go wrong. So let's have a little reality check and look at the common mistakes that can completely wreck an otherwise good risk assessment.
This quote just nails it. The single biggest mistake is not involving the people who actually do the job. If a manager writes a risk assessment from their office without talking to the person operating the machine, I guarantee you they're going to miss things.
Your frontline staff are your most valuable safety resource, period.
And here are a few other classics. Using a generic one-size-fits-all template is a huge no-no. Forgetting about the non-routine stuff, like maintenance or deep cleaning, is another common trap. But maybe the most dangerous one is underestimating a risk because no one's been hurt yet. That's just luck, not a safety plan. And finally, treating the assessment like a dusty document on a shelf instead of a living tool that needs regular updates.
So far, a lot of what we've talked about is meeting your legal duties. But for the best companies, compliance is just the starting point. It's the floor, not the ceiling. There is a huge difference between doing the bare minimum and actively building a culture of safety excellence.
And this comparison shows that difference perfectly. On the one hand, you have HSE compliance. It's mandatory in the UK, it's about meeting the legal minimums, it's the have to. On the other hand, you have something like ISO 45001. That's a voluntary, international standard. Its goal isn't just compliance, it's about building a system for proactive, continuous improvement. It's the want to.
So here's the bottom line. Legal compliance will keep you out of trouble. But adopting a framework like ISO 45001 helps you build something far more powerful, a proactive safety culture. It weaves health and safety into the very fabric of the business, from top leadership all the way down.
And that really brings us to the final thought I want to leave you with. It's a simple question to take back with you. Is your workplace just compliant, or is it truly safe? Are you just ticking the boxes to avoid penalties? Or are you actively trying to create an environment where everyone feels and is genuinely safe? The answer to that really says everything.